This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. A double dose of worrisome economic statistics tonight from the government. Inflation with its highest quarterly gain in 2 years. Home building sharply down. That left some economists alarmed, but it sent the stock market soaring. CBS News business correspondent Ray Brady tries to sort out some of the mystery.
On Wall Street, the rise in last month's inflation rate, 0.5%, was not as bad as investors had expected. So stock prices rose, up more than 41 points on heavy volume. But economists took a different view of the same figures.
In actual fact, though, consumer prices rising at a 6.1% annual rate can hardly be rated as good news. And I think the problem is we're likely to see more of the same.
In today's report, food prices rose at twice their rate of a month ago. Clothing's up 1.4%. Gasoline's up 2.1%. So far this year, energy rates overall have rocketed up at an annual rate of 22.4%. And that's without the full effects of the Alaska oil spill. They won't show up until next month's figures.
We expect to see dramatic increases in gasoline prices, and overall consumer price index for April, we're currently projecting up 0.9%, the largest since 1981.
All that's putting the big squeeze on Americans. Prices are going up more than 6%, but incomes are rising only 4%. Adding to the squeeze, higher interest rates, jacked up by the Federal Reserve to fight inflation.
I watch my budget. I only buy what's necessary.
And that's made car companies desperate to sell cars.
0.0 financing or savings up to $3,000.
In other figures today, housing starts plummeted 5.4%, a worrisome sign to economists.
We're seeing the first signs of a recession. We're expecting the recession to begin in the second half of this year, and we're getting confirmation of that right now.
One bright spot, if a recession does come, it will cool off inflation. And it's expected, at least for now, to be a relatively mild one. Nothing like that economic hardship that hit Americans in the early 1980s. Dan?
Ray Brady, thanks. A vote in the House today spelled doom for nearly 100 U.S. military bases from coast to coast and layoffs and dislocations for thousands of workers. More about that from Deborah Potter.
For generations of American soldiers, this was their introduction to the Army, basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. But Dix will train no more, as Congress voted overwhelmingly today to close 86 military bases and cut back at 5 others. It didn't happen without some last-minute howling.
There's an old country and western song saying that if you hang them all, you get the guilty. If you hang them all, you cannot miss. Fort Dix is innocent.
But there was no picking and choosing today. Congress had to either accept or reject the entire list recommended by an outside commission that they created to avoid the political heat for closing bases.
We did it to ourselves. First, we tried to evade the tough decision and questions of what bases ought to be closed. Now we don't like the result.
This is a classic demonstration to the American public of just how incapable the Congress is of handling the most fundamental of our responsibilities.
Supporters claim that closing bases like Fort Sheridan outside Chicago and the Presidio in California will save close to $700 million a year. But local officials worry about the cost.
The economic loss would be devastating to San Francisco and the entire Bay Area. One of the things that has happened in the past when the federal government walks away is that the local government has to pick up the tab.
The pleas fell on deaf ears, as most in Congress were only too happy to approve a list that didn't affect their districts.
I know it's painful for the communities involved, but the bottom line is defense dollars are for defense needs, not for community development.
Some members say they'll keep fighting to save bases back home by denying the Pentagon the funds needed to close them. But they're not likely to succeed. So beginning next year, for the first time in more than a decade, bases across the country will start shutting down. Deborah Potter, CBS News on Capitol Hill.
The jury heard closing arguments today in the 9-week Oliver North Iran-Contra trial. CBS News law correspondent Rita Braver tells us both sides saved their most scathing words for last.
Prosecutor John Kecker today summed up his case by calling Oliver North the Joe Isuzu of government, a compulsive and habitual liar who followed Adolf Hitler's old strategy. The victor will never be asked if he told the truth. And Kecker declared the tragedy of Oliver North is that a man who says he cared so much about freedom and democracy in Nicaragua forgot about the demands of freedom and democracy here at home. He took the jurors once more through all the charges against North, obstructing and lying to Congress and the Attorney General, violating tax laws, and illegally accepting a security system and traveler's checks. And in sarcastic reference to North's constant assertions that he was acting under orders from former National Security Council Chief Robert McFarlane and the late CIA Director William Casey, Kecker charged, saying McFarlane and Casey made me do it is no more a defense to man's law than saying the devil made me do it is to God's law. North's attorney Brendan Sullivan thundered back his response. It's the government that's blaming Ollie North for everything. They'll do anything to get Colonel North. He exhorted the jurors, on this case, the government's off track, has run wild, and it's up to you to stop it. He reminded them that North is charged with lying to Congress in letters actually signed by McFarlane. That's your United States government at work, and if you don't find that frightening, I do. But he saved his greatest fury for the comparison to Adolf Hitler, calling it outrageous, sick, and twisted, and charging anybody who will link Colonel North to Adolf Hitler is not credible.
Tomorrow, both Sullivan and Kecker will have one last chance at the jury. Deliberations will begin on Thursday. Rita Braver, CBS News, Washington.
A spokesman late today said comedian Lucille Ball suffered an apparent heart attack and was rushed to a Los Angeles hospital. The spokesman said the 77-year-old actress was conscious when she arrived at Cedars of Sinai Medical Center. He said Lucille Ball was undergoing surgery. Now, still to come on the CBS Evening News, Richard Roth in Massachusetts on a seasonal serial killer. And David Browning in Hollywood on money, the movies, and strangers in town. It's the 6th anniversary of the bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon, and tonight President Bush appealed to Lebanese factions and Syria to end the latest and worst round of killing in Beirut. The president spoke after conferring by phone today with French President Mitterrand. From London, Tom Fenton has more.
70 wounded Muslims were evacuated from Lebanon today. They were hurriedly loaded into ambulances during a lull in the shelling to be taken to a French Navy hospital ship waiting off the coast. They are escaping from the nightmare of Beirut. There's no respite for the rest of the population. Sleep has been rare for more than a month. Shell-shocked residents of Beirut emerged from basement shelters this morning to survey the damage from one of the worst nights so far. More than a month of indiscriminate shelling of both Christian and Muslim neighborhoods has caused billions in damage. The psychological toll is also heavy. There's no way out for the poor. Caught in the battle between the Christian forces and the far more powerful Syrian army, their plight gets steadily worse. General Michel Aoun, commander of the Christian forces, has vowed to oust the Syrians from Lebanon, but some of his supporters are reported to be ready to sue for peace. In the Middle East power game, Lebanon is one of the few cards President Assad of Syria has left, and he's not yet ready to give it up. Late today, the Muslim casualties from West Beirut were loaded onto a small boat and ferried out to the French Navy hospital ship. The evacuation of only 70 of the more than 900 civilians wounded in the Battle of Beirut may be a token gesture, but it's the only gesture of practical help so far from any Western nation. Tom Fenton, CBS News, London.
Thousands of Chinese students tried to storm Communist Party headquarters in Beijing tonight, calling for democracy and human rights. It was one of the biggest demonstrations anyone could recall in the Chinese capital. John Sheehan is our man in Beijing.
Tonight, for the second night in a row, thousands of Chinese students marched through the streets of Beijing. But what started as a manifestation of sorrow at the death of a reformist leader has turned increasingly political, with protesters demanding, among other things, freedom of speech and freedom of the press. At the Monument to Revolutionary Heroes in Tiananmen Square, some of the demonstrators held up a portrait of Hu Yaobang, who died of heart failure last Saturday. Hu was once the #2 man in China, head of the Communist Party and heir apparent to Supreme Leader Deng Xiaoping. But 2 years ago, Hu Yaobang was ousted in disgrace. He was accused of not cracking down soon enough or hard enough on student demonstrations that swept several Chinese cities in 1986. Since that time, mass protests like this one have been against the law. That's one of the things the students are complaining about. This afternoon, a few hundred staged a sit-in at the Great Hall of the People, demanding that officials meet with them to hear their grievances. The only official word the demonstrators heard was "go home." Instead, the crowds tonight besieged Zhongnan High, the new forbidden city where the government rules from behind high walls. Chanting "Long live democracy, fight bureaucracy," they pressed to the very gates of power. The police appear to be under orders not to interfere. But if the protests continue, Chinese authorities are not likely to remain tolerant for very long. John Sheehan, CBS News, Beijing.
One day after solidarity was restored to legal status in Poland, Lech Walesa met with the Communist Party leader who tried to kill the independent trade union, General Wojciech Jaruzelski. It was their first meeting in 7 years. Jaruzelski said they had come a long and difficult way to begin the work of national reconciliation. Bomb blast in an Indianapolis Kmart store. The victim, a little girl. Gary Reeves is covering.
An evening Kmart shopping trip almost cost 5-year-old Erin Bauer her life. She picked up what looked like a pump toothpaste tube, but a metal pipe bomb was hidden inside. It blew off 4 of her fingers. Only emergency surgery saved her eyesight.
She was partly on fire, and she had severe injuries to her arm and face and abdomen.
Investigators don't know if the bombing was at random or if the store was targeted. Police released composite drawings of 2 young men wanted for questioning. They seemed suspiciously calm as they left the scene seconds after the blast.
Usually people want to rush to see what's going on. These 2 gentlemen apparently left while everybody else was going the other direction.
Police are questioning recently fired workers and shoplifting suspects. Kmart is offering a $5,000 reward. Young Erin Bauer remains hospitalized, but her family is hoping for a quick recovery.
She's a very happy girl, very bright. Just a joy to be around. And there's no reason to think that she's not going to be that way when we get done.
Federal investigators are reconstructing the bomb to determine its origin. But while police have little to go on, Kmart believes the bombing is an isolated incident and says its stores are secure. Gary Reeves, CBS News, Chicago.
A Massachusetts city grapples tonight with the frightening phenomenon of the serial killer. A murderer who strikes again and again and again may achieve notoriety like Jack the Ripper or Ted Bundy. But often the crimes, etched in blood and horror, don't even attract much attention. That's the case in New Bedford, and correspondent Richard Roth explains why.
The same grim scene in what's become a familiar drama has been repeated now 8 times since last July, with startling similarity. 2 more bodies were found beside New Bedford area highways just last month. 2 more victims in a series of sordid killings, all unsolved. And yet in most of this seaport town, the crimes have hardly raised a ripple of fear.
It isn't something that everyone is talking about, not in the city. Maybe everyone outside the city is discussing it, but we don't sit around, talking about the serial killer.
All of the bodies were found within a radius of about 7 miles. All of the victims were women. The common denominator in all of the women's lives was a link to the drug trade or prostitution or petty crime that flourishes in a part of town known as Weld Square, a seedy district close by the waterfront, but far from the daily concerns of most of New Bedford. The district attorney believes each of the crimes began with a woman climbing into a car.
That's where it all begins. It may be someone they thought they knew, maybe someone they got drugs from, but at some point the chemistry changed from knowing this person to now he's a homicidal maniac or something, and now decides to kill the woman.
Another link is timing. All the killings are believed to have occurred between last April and last September, the busiest season for New Bedford's fishing industry. the season that's just beginning now.
Everything else is just speculation. Authorities claim there are 4 suspects, but say little more. Does a hidden motive connect the crimes? Have the killings stopped? Only questions, like those asked by the mother of a victim.
How did she fight? Was she choked? Was she stabbed? How did she feel? Did she lay there? How long did she lay there, maybe bleeding or what, and nobody could help her? That's what I think of.
Authorities are still searching for clues and more. There are at least 2 other women missing since last year who it's believed may also be victims, but whose bodies haven't been found. Richard Roth, CBS News, New Bedford, Massachusetts.
A coroner in Doylestown, Pennsylvania today said activist Abbie Hoffman committed suicide with a combination of alcohol and the prescription drug phenobarbital. The 52-year-old Hoffman was found dead in his home last Wednesday. Speaker of the House Jim Wright was quick off the mark today in opening his defense against accusations leveled by the House Ethics Committee. He went straight to the group that could have the final say on his political future. As we hear from CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Bob Schieffer on Capitol Hill.
Jim Wright was smiling as he left to plead his case before his most important jury, a closed meeting of House Democrats. But neither Wright nor his friends underestimate the tough political fight ahead or its potential cost.
If we're going to give full consideration to protecting ourselves politically, then I think Jim Wright
argued before the House Democrats that he had done nothing wrong.
I told them I intend to fight and I intend to win. I told them that I have never done anything to dishonor this institution, and I never will.
By most accounts, Wright helped himself with his colleagues, but the drama has cast a pall over the Capitol. On the House floor today, Congress literally just went through the motions.
People are tense, they're down, they're frustrated. It diverts attention from what should we be doing.
Regardless of how the case comes out, Wright's friends are certain Republicans will try to use the Wright case against each of them in next year's election, which only adds to their gloom.
And I frankly think that the Republicans over at the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee are sharpening knives and printing bumper stickers and buttons and getting ready.
This is a direct challenge to the Democrats. It's time for them to help Governor get out of the way.
Whatever the case, the battle for public opinion outside Washington is only in the earliest stages. A CBS News New York Times poll taken this weekend showed that 3/4 of those questioned were either undecided or said they did not have enough information about the situation to make a judgment. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Hooray for Hollywood. So goes the old popular song written in 1937. Now they're singing it all over the world, and as David Browning reports, all the way to the bank.
Stargazing is a major pastime for movie fans in Hollywood. Look, there's Kim. Look, there's Morgan. But to studio insiders, this man is the hottest new face in town. He's an entertainment executive from Australia. His name is Christopher Skase, and he just paid $1 billion to buy United Artists, the movie company that's brought you everything from Stagecoach to 007 to Rain Man.
I think that in looking at the industry today, you have to focus and measure on the basis of what is applicable internationally. And I think if you look at, for example, a film like Rain Man, it's going to be universally successful.
The fact is, when Hollywood premieres a movie these days, it hopes to make as much money from it overseas as it does at home. The bigger the hit, the bigger the overseas potential.
Roger Rabbit, say, for instance, which did a little over $150 million domestically. The film did almost $150 million in the foreign markets. That's exceptional.
The following movie has been classified 18. Suitable only for persons...
The overseas demand for American movies and TV shows is fueled by the cheap dollar and the deregulation of a lot of foreign television. New cable and home satellite services seem to pop up daily in Britain and elsewhere. And what viewers want to see comes from Hollywood.
Monday at 11:35 on Sky Movies.
Without the foreign market's growth and the receptivity to our film, I don't think a lot of our product would be made today. I think a lot of our companies could be in trouble.
¿Por qué no la llevo a tu casa para que puedas conocerla?
No lo sé.
And so it is that the couples from 30-something are made to speak yuppie Spanish for foreign television. And more foreign cash speaks too as Japanese banks get into the business of loaning money to make movies.
Right now, we've got about $200 million out.
It's fairly sizable.
It's a good start.
Well, I like the color of their yen very much. Jeremy Thomas produced The Last Emperor, and to make more movies for Hollywood, Japanese investors have staked him to $50 million, translated from the yen.
I think there'll be more deals struck between Western filmmakers and the East, especially Japan, because of their need to be dominant in every field.
Foreign money has become the talk of Hollywood, with Rupert Murdoch's Australian empire now controlling 20th Century Fox, with Christopher Skase coming from down under to United Artists, and with Japanese businesses considering buyouts of Universal and Columbia. The question on the Hollywood party circuit is, how much foreign investment is too much?
You wonder what kind of movies they're going to want to make.
Companies don't make artistic decisions over the people who make movies. They never have.
And besides, the original founders of United Artists probably wouldn't mind that the Australians are taking it over 70 years later. After all, Mary Pickford was Canadian by birth, Charlie Chaplin, British. Consider that. And good day. David Browning, CBS News, Hollywood.
And that's the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather. See you tomorrow. Good night.
I'm Kathleen Sullivan. Tomorrow, the crisis in affordable housing, how owning a home is just a dream for many. Also, John Boyd and Susan Lucci join us on CBS This Morning.
This is CBS.
Looking for a great truck or a great truck deal?